Are you interested in receiving a blessing? What if God intended to bless his people through speaking his name? I realize that tradition says that his four-letter Hebrew name is too holy to pronounce, too powerful to handle, and therefore, according to tradition, we are prohibited from receiving this blessing. Well, I have been able to uncover some information, inspiration, and revelation in Scripture that has caused me to stop tiptoeing through the tulips of tradition and proclaim his name everywhere I can. There is an obscure but powerful verse with a word hidden behind the English translation of many Bibles that is a perfect candidate for what I love to do. My name is Keith Johnson of Biblical Foundations Academy International. Our mission is to inspire people around the world to build a biblical foundation for their faith. Welcome to Scripture Bytes. This place is my virtual library where I'll be able to give you a glimpse of my approach to studying Scripture using all of my available tools. Let's start by launching our Scripture Bytes interface.
Loading interface. Uploading Scripture.
The SBI will help us expedite the process of discovery so that you'll be able to understand the Scripture Byte for yourself and apply it in your life. Our control verse is Exodus 20:24b. We'll read it from the New International Version. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. Sounds like an invitation. If I honor his name, he will bless me. Now we need to discover what the Scripture Byte word honored means so we can figure out how to get a visit and a blessing from God. Agreed? If you're a regular Scripture Byte student, you can probably guess what's next. This is a rare time where our context is actually within the Scripture Byte verse. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Exodus 20:24a. This Scripture Byte takes place in the context of God speaking to his people at Mount Sinai after he gave them the Ten Commandments, just a few verses earlier in Exodus 20:1-17. Surely you know what happened there. After the fire, smoke, and loud blasts of the shofar, God introduces himself by speaking his name. Come to think of it, maybe that would be a great verse for Scripture Bytes. In fact, maybe we should do an entire series on what took place at Mount Sinai. Where were we again? Oh, after all of the drama at the mountain and the giving of what are traditionally known as the Ten Commandments, then comes the context of our verse. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this. You have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourself gods of silver or gods of gold." Exodus 20:18-23 NIV. Did you notice that the word Lord in our verses of context has all capital letters? This is not simply a stylistic way to honor the name of God, but rather it is a signal to you and me to know exactly what Hebrew word is behind this English title Lord. In fact, when you see the word Lord in all capital letters, you can know that just behind that title is the personal name of fame that, according to the NIV translation, is to be honored, whatever that means. Back to our control verse. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. That's the NIV. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of this verse, I find it interesting that what looks like a disconnection between altars, sacrifices, and honoring his name actually has a strong connection historically, linguistically, and practically. Once we take a closer look at our Scripture Byte, you will understand just how connected his name is with his altar. By now, you probably remember that the Hebrew language is made up of 22 letters and is written from right to left. Bikol hamakom asher askir et shemi. The last three words, askir et shemi, are the foundation of our Scripture Byte. Now for some quick linguistic information. Shemi, which is translated means my name, is the direct object or the recipient of the action of the verb, askir. We know this because of the two-letter word et, which has been the undeserving star of some folks who would desperately love for this small but important untranslated word to mean much more than the Hebrew language allows. Et is simply the marker used for the direct object of the action. Now, for lights, camera, and action for the star of the verse. Askir is the word that the NIV translated as I cause to be honored. That's a 5-star word that needs 5 English words to express the power of one Hebrew verb. The form of the verb is the Hifil imperfect first common singular. Or in other words, it is a causative action with a future flair, meaning I will cause. The 3-letter Hebrew root of this word is zakar, which has 12 different forms and is found 441 times in the source scroll. What I find really interesting is how the NIV picks and chooses when to let this word shine in its intended meaning and when, like in our Scripture Byte verse, they hide it among a basket full of other English words. In fact, in many versions, they use as many as 30 different English words for the 240 times that this root in its various forms is translated into English. There are 4 other times that this exact word is translated in the NIV 4 different and interesting ways. First example, Isaiah chapter 63:7, askir, I will tell. Psalms 71:16, askir, I will proclaim. Psalms 77:11, askir, I will remember. And Psalms 87:4, askir, I will record. Yet in our Scripture Byte verse, the NIV translators made a curious decision. They saw this word askir and decided to translate it as I cause to be honored. This is as close as they were willing to go in shining the intended spotlight of stardom on this 5-star Hebrew word. Let's slow down and take a closer look at a different verse where the NIV translated the same root word 2 different ways. When Joseph was speaking to the butler before he was released from prison, he said these words, "But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." Genesis 40:14 NIV. If we take a peek behind the English words remember and mention, we find 2 Hebrew nuggets, zekartani behind remember and vehezkartani behind mention. Both of these words have the same root word zakar as our word askir in Exodus 20:24. The root word zakar being used in the above verse is letting us hear Joseph's words to the baker as he says, "Remember me with your mind and mention me with your mouth." Now, let's take a look at our verse with this information in our mind to see if we can mention it with our mouths. "Wherever I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you." Exodus 20:24b, the Scripture Bytes version. When studying Scripture, I always like to have at least 2 English translations open along with my scroll source. It just so happens that if I check the Jewish Publication Society English translation, it says, "In every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you." Exodus 20:24b in JPS. Hey, the JPS sees the same thing as our SBI. Impressive. Now, if they would only remove the traditional prohibition from people mentioning God's name, a blessing would be on the way. Oh, now, about the first part of the verse, "Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle." Exodus 20:24a. Where would be the most probable place to mention his name but at the place of the altar where prayers and sacrifices ascend to him? Now do you understand why I have been so excited about sharing everything I can about this personal, powerful, and profound name that is to be used in prayer, proclamation, and praise? I guess I should do a Scripture Byte to teach you how to mention or pronounce this name that we find written with full consonants and vowels in the oldest complete Hebrew manuscript in the world. In the meantime, I hope you will continue studying this topic of God's name by visiting the BFA International site and interacting with all that we have made available behind the Tetragrammaton door, the 4-letter name of God. In the meantime, keep reading.
This is your SBI assistant. Did you enjoy this Scripture Byte? If so, share it with your friends. Be sure to become a free member at bfainternational.com to download a PDF companion study guide for this edition of Scripture Bytes. Visit bfainternational.com today to join the conversation.